Managing Director, thank you so much for joining CNBC. You have an update for us on Zambia's debt restructuring.
We are working very hard to get all creditors of Zambia to agree on the parameters of debt restructurings that are defined by our debt sustainability analysis, and we are making progress, but we are also placing the issue of debt restructuring on sounder footing overall. We just launched a sovereign debt global roundtable that brings for the first time in many, many years all creditors, traditional and new, private and public, with the debtor countries, so there can be a meaningful conversation and we can finally accelerate progress on debt restructuring. We are in a situation that needs it. 60% of low-income countries are either at debt distress or near debt distress, and we have a group of middle-income countries that are so overburdened that they are at the edge of being able to handle their economies. So progress is paramount.
And China is one of the main creditors of those countries. To your mind, does that give them an unfair advantage in any conversation?
Well, China has been stepping up engagement with developing countries for quite some time, and today they are indeed one of the largest creditors. We have been working with the Chinese authorities to recognize that with the larger share comes bigger responsibility, and most recently they have made some progress. They co-chaired the creditor committee for Chad. We completed restructuring for Chad, the first country to finally get it done. They're co-chairing the creditor committee for Zambia, and they are participating in the global sovereign debt roundtable. What we want to see is faster, more effective action on a country-by-country basis, but also a global conversation that defines how we handle so many countries today under a heavy burden of debt. We fail, not only countries fail, but we then have a risk of a global debt crisis. We don't see it today, but better be there early, better prevent it from happening.
How do you respond to those who would look at this situation and look at the fact that China, as I say, is one of those large creditor nations, and say this gives them an unfair advantage, particularly when it comes to the fight for rare earth minerals? And of course, Zambia is a country that holds so many of those.
What we want to see is China recognizing that with more wealth comes more responsibility. They have been providing financing on large scale to developing countries, and in some cases that has led to them being in a position of higher influence over these countries. But what I'm very pleased to see today is that more and more countries that are rich of minerals are saying, we want to be open for business for everyone. We recognize that competition is one that works for us, and Zambia is a great case. Zambia has now a president and a government that are very prudent in saying equal treatment for everyone, and that applies to also how they approach their creditors, including China.
Since we spoke just a few days ago about the situation in Ukraine, the IMF and Ukraine have come to a new set of agreements. How quickly, in your mind, are we going to see a full-fledged IMF program for that country?
I am very pleased with the outcome of these 4 months of intensive engagement with Ukrainian authorities that led to the completion of the review of our program with very high marks. What we have addressed are issues of great importance for Ukraine: fiscal policy, governance, anti-corruption, the performance of the financial sector. This excellent outcome paves the way for the fund to work towards a full-fledged program with Ukraine. And I can say responsibly that Ukraine does need the IMF at this very critical time. Why? Because financial needs are significant. We put them somewhere between $40 and $48 billion for this year. And 2, because the country does need the policy support that the IMF provides. To run a war economy is not a trivial matter. And our staff from day one, from the 24th of February, has been engaged to provide advice to the Ukrainian authorities how to move towards protecting the economy at the time of war. It is now a functioning economy. We are seeing this year the prospect of growth resuming in Ukraine after the country's GDP shrunk by 30% last year. This is the outcome of very committed economic team. The central bank, the Ministry of Finance, these are remarkable people working in these institutions.
So how quickly are we going to see that?
We are going to be moving very fast.
What are we talking
we are talking about we are not talking about a long period of time. Why? Because the foundation is built through this 4 months of intensive engagement. Speed is of the essence. We will be coming to a conclusion not too far into the future. I cannot say any more today, but I know that time is not Ukraine's friend in these extraordinary conditions of war. We talk about a number of weeks, not a very long period of time.
And that would seem to assume that the IMF believes that putting a program in place during a time of war, that the victory is on the horizon.
What it says is that we have a country where institutions work, where pensions are paid, where social services are in place, where the government is keenly interested to continue to reform even when bombs are falling. This institutional strength comes from two sources. One, the decades of engagement we have had with Ukraine. Two, the determination of the Ukrainian people. I am so impressed by what I see on a daily basis, how people in the offices of the Ministry of Finance go to work. Sirens, we can hear them in our calls with them, are going, but work continues. Determination, that will to keep the country together, is what gives us confidence to work with Ukraine.
And accomplishing the IMF program with Ukraine would then pave the way, would it not, for their ascension to the EU?
We make the desire of Ukraine to join the European Union a priority in our work. So when we look at the reforms we are supporting, from the functioning of the tax system, which by the way is quite impressive, and one thing that people may be interested to know, the most reliable source of revenues in Ukraine, value-added tax. When we worked on value-added tax, of course there were proponents and opponents. Now it happens to be quite a significant achievement from the past. What we are also looking into is spending priorities and how what Ukraine does on the governance side, especially anti-corruption, is going to help them to accelerate joining the European Union. They belong there, and the fund, of course, can help move faster on that road.